The summer of 2005 gripped Omaha, Nebraska, like a fever. The air thick with heat that shimmered over the cracked sidewalks of Delilah Harper's quiet street. At 12 years old, Delilah sat on her front porch, her chestnut curls plastered to her neck by sweat, her hazel eyes tracing stories in the bruised evening sky. Her journal, a leather-bound relic with a spine cracked from countless nights of dreaming, was her sanctuary, its pages brimming with sketches of deserts, where cacti wore cowboy hats, mountains that whispered secrets to the stars, and skies vast enough to drown her fears. Inside her small yellow house, her parents' voices clashed like shattering glass, their once joyful marriage splintering into a bitter divorce that left Delilah's world trembling on the edge of collapse. Rachel and Michael Harper had been high school sweethearts, swaying to Patsy Cline in their kitchen, their laughter a melody Delilah thought would never fade. But now their words were daggers, slicing through thin walls, each argument a fresh wound. Delilah, with her artist's heart and boundless imagination, escaped into her journal sketching cacti in 10-gallon hats, UFOs glowing under starry skies, buffalo charging across endless plains. By June, the divorce was no longer a whisper but a scream. Court dates set, custody battles looming, and Delilah's childhood unraveling like a threadbare quilt. She'd curl up on her bed, pencil scratching, writing, "I wish I could draw a place where no one fights," her tears smudging the ink, her heart aching for a world that didn't hurt. Rachel, her mother, saw the light dimming in her daughter's eyes, and made a desperate choice. Delilah needed an escape, a chance to breathe air free of lawyers' letters and midnight sobs. That's when Uncle Travis rolled into town, his Chevy pickup rattling like a tin can stuffed with secret. Travis, Rachel's younger brother, was 32, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a smile that could warm the coldest heart. He wasn't like Delilah's parents, whose every word carried the weight of regret. Travis had a laugh that roared like an engine, stories of ghost towns and canyons that glowed red at dusk, and a knack for making Delilah feel like the world was hers to conquer. He'd always been her favorite, the uncle who'd sneak her cookies, teach her to fix a carburetor, and listen to her dreams of becoming an artist explorer, her eyes wide with wonder as she imagined painting the stars. But Travis carried a darkness Delilah was too young to name. His eyes sometimes clouded, a quiet sadness lurking behind his grin, a history of depression and seizures locked away like a rusted toolbox. He'd vanish for months, chasing highways to nowhere, returning with tales of diners and deserts, but never the truth of where his mind had wandered. Rachel knew his struggles: medication, therapy, a car accident in his 20s that left him with a fractured skull and a prescription for anticonvulsants. But she trusted him. He was family, and family was supposed to be a safe harbor, a lighthouse in the storm. She believed the road trip would heal them both, give Travis purpose and Delilah joy. "Ready for the open road, kiddo?" Travis asked, tossing Delilah's duffel bag into the truck's bed, his voice warm but tinged with something unsteady, like a radio signal flickering out. Delilah stood on the driveway, clutching her journal, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease. She'd never been farther than Lincoln, a 2-hour drive that felt like crossing an ocean. Now they were headed west on Interstate 80, for a 2-week adventure, chasing a horizon that promised freedom from the chaos at home. She nodded, her curls bouncing, and climbed into the passenger seat, her journal open to a fresh page. June 30th, 2005, she wrote, her pencil trembling with anticipation. "We're leaving today. Uncle Travis says the road is a story, and every mile's a new page. I'm gonna write it all down, every single piece, so I never forget." The first days were a kaleidoscope of wonder, each moment a new stroke in Delilah's journal, her world expanding with every mile. They crossed into Wyoming, where the plains stretched endless under a sky that hummed with possibility, its blue so deep it seemed to pulse. Their first stop was a giant concrete dinosaur outside a gas station, its green paint peeling, its grin frozen in time, defiant against the years. Delilah clambered onto its tail, laughing as Travis flapped his arms, roaring like a T-Rex, his eyes bright for the first time in days. The sound of her giggles echoed across the empty lot, a fleeting melody against the hum of distant traffic. That night, in a motel with a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a trapped fly, she sketched the dinosaur, adding a speech bubble, "Roar if you're free." Travis peeked over her shoulder, his chuckle warm but fleeting, his hand lingering on her shoulder as if anchoring himself to her light. "You're gonna be famous, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. But his smile faltered, a shadow passing over his face like a cloud across the sun. They ate greasy burgers at a diner called Mabel's, where the waitress, Doris, with her towering beehive hairdo and a name tag pinned crookedly to her apron, called Travis sugar and slipped Delilah a free chocolate milkshake. Its cold sweetness a balm against the heat. Delilah wrote about it, her handwriting loopy and alive. July 2nd, Doris says I have an artist's soul. Uncle Travis laughed and said I'm trouble with a pencil. The milkshake was so good I forgot about Mom and Dad's fights. Just for a little while. She sketched the diner's counter, capturing Doris's hair in wobbly lines, the chrome stools glinting under fluorescent lights. She tucked a ketchup-stained napkin between the pages, its edges curling like a secret, a relic of a moment when the world felt kind. At night they camped under stars that glittered like spilled sugar, the Milky Way a river of light above the Wyoming plains. Or they crashed in motels with creaky beds, and air thick with cigarette smoke, the walls stained with stories of travelers long gone. Travis taught Delilah to read a map, pointing out I-80's winding path through the Badlands, his finger tracing the squiggly line as if it held the key to something lost. She followed with her own finger, imagining they were explorers in a world where no one cried, where families stayed whole. Her journal filled with sketches, sagebrush bending in the wind, a rusted windmill creaking under a pink sky, a jackrabbit frozen mid-leap, its eyes wide with fear or freedom. July 4th, 2005, she wrote, "We watched fireworks in Laramie. Uncle Travis says the best ones make your heart jump. I drew a firework like a sunflower, exploding yellow, because it felt like hope. I want to keep this feeling forever." Travis was patient, letting her linger at every roadside oddity, a world's largest ball of twine, its fibers fraying under the sun, a petrified wood museum, where the curator, a grizzled man with a limp, let her touch a fossilized tree, its surface cool and ancient under her fingertips. He teased her about her endless questions. Why do cacti have spines? How do stars stay in the sky? But always answered, even when his voice softened like he was speaking through a fog. Delilah noticed he'd sometimes stare at the road too long, his fingers tightening on the wheel, his jaw clenched as if holding back a scream. Once, she saw him swallow a pill from an orange bottle, his hands trembling, his eyes darting as if checking for ghosts in the rearview mirror. When he caught her watching, he forced a grin and asked if she wanted to pick the next stop. His voice too bright, too quick. She chose an alien-themed gift shop in Rock Springs, buying a glow-in-the-dark UFO keychain that dangled from her backpack. She sketched it in her journal, its green glow a beacon in the dark. July 7th, 2005. I'm gonna be an astronaut artist, she wrote. Uncle Travis says I can be anything, but his smile looked sad today, like he's carrying something heavy. By the second week they reached the Tons, their peaks jagged against a sky so blue it burned, their shadows falling like giants across the valley. Delilah stood at a lookout point, her journal open, sketching the mountains, while Travis leaned against the truck, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup, his eyes distant, lost in a place she couldn't follow. July 10th, 2005, she wrote, the Tons are giants dreaming under the stars. Uncle Travis says they're older than time. I want to climb one and touch the cloud. That night they camped near Jackson Hole, the campfire crackling as Travis told stories of hitchhiking through New Mexico, sleeping under bridges in Oregon, his voice low and rhythmic, like a lullaby for the lost. Delilah listened, her pencil flying, drawing Travis as a cowboy riding a buffalo across the plains, his hat tilted, his grin wide but fragile. He's the best uncle ever, she wrote, underlining the words, though a small part of her wondered why his stories always stopped short of the truth, why his eyes seemed to search for something beyond the firelight. Travis's light dimmed more often now, and Delilah felt it like a chill. She saw it in the way he'd go quiet for hours, his eyes fixed on the horizon, or rub his temples like pushing away a storm. She didn't know about his seizures, triggered by stress or missed medication, or the fog that clouded his mind when the world pressed too hard. She only knew he was her co-pilot, her protector, who'd promised to keep her safe on this journey, through a world that felt too big, too wild. July 15th, 2005, she wrote in a motel outside Salt Lake City, its walls paper thin, the hum of the highway seeping through. The desert is so quiet, it's loud. I keep thinking about Mom and Dad, how they don't laugh anymore. I wish they could see this. Uncle Travis says, sometimes you gotta leave to find yourself. I don't know what that means, but he looked sad, like he's lost. I drew us driving to the moon to make him smile, but he just stared at it, like he didn't see it. By the third week they crossed into Utah, the landscape turning raw and red, like the earth had been sliced open with a jagged knife. The air smelled of dust and sage, sharp and wild, and Delilah felt like they were driving into one of her sketches, a world of canyons and secrets, beautiful but edged with danger. They stopped at the Desert Rose, a rundown motel off I-80 near the Nevada border, its neon sign flickering, half its letters dead, casting a sickly glow over the cracked pavement and stubborn weeds of the parking lot. Delilah loved its quirks, the faded cactus mural on the office wall, its paint peeling like old skin, the vending machine dispensing only root beer, its hum a lonely song in the dusk. She sat on the curb that evening, sketching the sign's loopy letters, the sky bruising purple behind it, the air heavy with something she couldn't name. Travis checked them in, his shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed, his movements slow, like he was wading through water. He tossed her a grin, but it was fragile, like cracked glass ready to shatter. Last stop for tonight, kiddo, he said, his voice rough. Get some rest, big day tomorrow. That night, Delilah wrote, her handwriting rushed, tinged with unease. July 12th. The desert rose smells like dust and dreams. The cactus on the wall looks like it's waving, but it's creepy in the dark like it's watching me. Uncle Travis says we're close to the Bonneville Salt Flats. I want to run across them, like I'm flying. He's been quiet today, staring at the road like he's waiting for something. We sang Johnny Cash in the truck, but his voice was shaky, like he was scared. I think he's the best uncle ever, but I'm starting to wonder if he's okay. Something feels wrong, like a storm's coming. She sketched the motel sign, adding a tiny UFO, a nod to her keychain, its green glow a small rebellion against the dark. She tucked the journal under her pillow, her dreams restless with salt flats and shadows, the sound of footsteps echoing in her mind. The next morning Delilah was gone. The sun was barely up, its light pale and cold, when Carl, the motel manager, a wiry man with a cigarette tucked behind his ear, and a face carved by years of desert wind, found Travis slumped in the parking lot. His face was pale as bone, his breathing shallow, his keys clutched in a trembling hand, a spilled water bottle glinting beside him like a discarded clue. He was unresponsive, his body limp against the cracked pavement, his eyes half open, staring at nothing. Carl's hands shook as he called 911, his voice sharp with panic, and paramedics arrived to a crowd of whispering guests, their faces pale in the dawn, their murmurs buzzing like flies. Travis was rushed to a hospital in Salt Lake City, waking hours later, disoriented, his memory a black void that swallowed everything. Where's Delilah? He asked, his voice raw, his hands clawing at the hospital sheets, his eyes wild with panic. No one had answers, only questions that hung like smoke. Room 12 was a frozen snapshot, a shrine to a girl who'd vanished. Delilah's duffel bag sat on the bed, its zipper half open, her clothes neatly folded, jeans faded at the knees, a tie-dye t-shirt with a sunburst pattern, sneakers with doodled soles, their ink faded but defiant, like a child's rebellion against time. Her journal, her constant shadow, her voice was gone. So was she. Police descended on the Desert Rose, their flashlights slicing through the desert dawn, their boots crunching on gravel. Cadaver dogs sniffed the scrub, their handlers silent, faces grim with the weight of hope and dread. Helicopters thrummed overhead, their blades chopping the still air, casting shadows that flickered like ghosts. Volunteers scoured the highway for miles, their boots kicking up dust that settled like grief, their eyes scanning for a glimpse of curls, a flash of color, anything, nothing. No footprints, no witnesses, no trace of a 12-year-old with a dreamer's heart. Travis became the epicenter of suspicion, a lightning rod for every fear and theory. He was the last person with her, the only one who might know what happened. But his story was a void, a blank page where answers should have been. He remembered checking into the Desert Rose, Delilah laughing as she sketched the sign, her pencil scratching in the dust. After that nothing, just darkness, like someone had erased his mind. Doctors found anticonvulsants in his system, suggesting a seizure tied to his medical history, but the police weren't convinced. They grilled him in a cinderblock room, the air thick with stale coffee and doubt, their questions sharp as blades. Why were you in the parking lot? Where's the journal? What did you do to her?
Their voices echoed, relentless, cutting deeper with each demand. Travis sat, his hands trembling, his eyes red with unshed tears, repeating, "I'd never hurt her, she's my niece." His voice was a broken thing, cracking under the weight of guilt and confusion. But suspicion clung like damp rot, seeping into every crack. His medical records leaked to the press, painted a troubled portrait: depression since his teens, seizures since his 20s, a car accident that left him with a fractured skull and a tether to medication. The media swarmed, turning the desert rose into a circus of flashing cameras and screaming headlines. Uncle suspected in girl's disappearance. Online forums exploded with venom. Travis was a drifter, unstable, maybe dangerous. Some said he'd sold her to a stranger in the desert night, others that he'd snapped, his mind fractured by seizures or madness. Rachel watched from Omaha, her grief a raw bleeding wound that pulsed with every headline. She'd trusted her brother to keep her daughter safe, to bring her back with stories and smiles. Now she couldn't bear his name, his face, his existence. The betrayal a knife in her heart. The investigation stretched on, relentless and fruitless, a machine grinding hope into dust. Divers searched murky reservoirs, their lights piercing the dark water, for a glimpse of something no one wanted to find. Rangers combed national parks, their boots crunching through sagebrush, their eyes scanning for a scrap of fabric, a glint of metal. Tip lines buzzed with false leads, truckers who'd seen nothing, psychics spinning lies for attention. Delilah's face smiling, freckled from a school photo, plastered billboards, milk cartons, TV screens, her hazel eyes pleading for answer. Rachel shared copies of her old sketches, hoping their whimsy would spark a memory. A cactus in a cowboy hat, a UFO glowing green, a buffalo crowned like royalty. The drawings became a haunting symbol, shared across news broadcasts and forums. A child's dreams turned into a cry for help. Online sleuths dubbed it the diary vanishing, obsessing over the missing journal. Was it a clue, a trophy? Had Delilah taken it and run? A 12-year-old fleeing into the desert's hungry dark. Months bled into years, the case growing colder with each passing season. Travis was never charged. No evidence, no body, no crime scene. But suspicion was a stain that wouldn't fade, a shadow that followed him like a curse. He spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility, his mind fraying under the weight of guilt, scrutiny, and a world that saw him as a monster. Then he vanished, slipping away like smoke. Some said he'd fled to Montana, living off the grid in a cabin buried in snow. Others whispered he'd taken his own life, unable to bear the accusations or the loss. Rachel didn't care. She stopped speaking his name, her heart too heavy for forgiveness, her trust shattered like glass scattered across a desert floor. Rachel's life became a shrine to Delilah, a fragile monument to a girl who'd vanished. She kept her daughter's room untouched, a time capsule of 205 frozen in amber. The bed held a quilt patterned with stars, its edges frayed from Delilah's restless nights. The desk was stacked with school books, their margins filled with her doodles, cacti, UFOs, buffalo. Half-finished sketch of a canyon hung on the wall, its colors defiant against the years, a testament to a girl who dreamed in color. Rachel worked as a librarian, shelving books by day, her hands steady but her heart unsteady. By night she scoured online forums, joining our diary vanishing, when it was a small group of locals swapping theories. By 2025 it had swelled to thousands, true crime buffs, amateur sleuths, trolls posting grainy photos of the desert rose, maps of I-80, even Travis's old driver's license, dug from public record. Theories ranged from plausible, Delilah was abducted by a transient, to wild, she joined a desert commune, been taken by aliens, a nod to her UFO keychain. Rachel read every post, her heart lurching at each new lead, only to crash when it led nowhere. A cycle of hope and despair that carved lines into her face. Each July 20th, Rachel held a vigil in a park near her house, surrounded by neighbors, friends and strangers drawn by the case's mystique. She'd clutch Delilah's cactus sketch, its cowboy hat jaunty under a starry sky, and speak her daughter's name. Delilah Harper, she'd say, her voice steady despite the tears. She's out there somewhere. Candles flickered in the Nebraska dusk, their flames trembling in the breeze, and for a moment, Rachel felt her daughter's presence, a whisper in the wind, a ghost in the starlight. The vigils were her ritual, her refusal to let Delilah fade. But each year the candles burned lower, the crowd smaller, the hope thinner. Travis's absence was a wound Rachel couldn't heal. She'd cut him off after the disappearance, unable to reconcile the brother she'd loved with the man who'd lost her daughter. In 2006 he'd called from a payphone, his voice slurred with grief or medication, begging for forgiveness, sobbing, "I didn't do it, Rachel. I'd die before I hurt her." She'd hung up, her hand shaking, her heart a stone. She hadn't heard from him since, didn't know if he was alive or dead, and didn't want to know. The betrayal was too deep, the pain too raw. In January 2025, a contractor renovating the Desert Rose shattered the silence. Behind a cracked mirror in room 12, wedged between the wall and a loose board, he found a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed, its ink smudged but legible. Delilah's name was scrawled inside the cover, her handwriting unmistakable, a child's loops and curls, defiant against time. The discovery exploded online, reigniting a case that had gone cold, its embers flaring into a wildfire. Rachel flew to Utah, her hands trembling as she boarded the plane, a copy of Delilah's cactus sketch tucked in her purse, like a talisman, its edges worn from years of clutching. At the police station, they handed her the journal, its leather soft and worn, its weight heavy with memory. She opened it, her breath catching, her daughter's voice leaping from the pages, like a ghost stepping into the light. Police dusted it for prints, finding only Delilah's, a fact that deepened the mystery, like a lock with no key. The pages chronicled her trip, sketches of diners with chrome counters, mountains piercing the sky, Travis's truck rumbling through the dust. Each stroke was a piece of her soul, a child's wonder captured in pencil and ink. But the final entries were different, jagged, written in a rush, the pencil pressed hard into the paper, as if fear itself guided her hand. "Something's wrong." The last page read, the words uneven, desperate, a cry from the dark. "I heard a noise outside, like footsteps, slow and heavy. Uncle Travis is asleep. I think. He was acting weird, like dizzy, stumbling, his eyes all wrong. I'm scared. I'm hiding this so no one takes it. If you find this, tell Mom I love her." Rachel read those words in a sterile police station, her sobs echoing off cinderblock walls, her tears falling on the yellowed pages, smudging the ink like rain on a window. The journal was a lifeline, and a wound, proof that Delilah had been afraid, alone, in her final moments at the Desert Rose. Why had she hidden it? What had she heard? The police reopened the case, but the journal raised more questions than answers, each word a new shadow. Travis, if alive, was a ghost, untraceable, lost to the world. The motel's 2005 records were gone, destroyed when the property changed hands, its secrets buried under dust and time. The Desert Rose itself was a husk, its walls crumbling, its neon sign dark, a tomb for a night that stole a girl. Online, the journal's scans spread like wildfire, posted by a local news outlet, their pixels dissected by thousands. Sleuths on our diary vanishing, poured over every word, every sketch, their theories spiraling into the absurd. The footsteps were proof of an abductor. Some said, a stranger lurking in the desert dark, watching, waiting. Others believed Delilah had seen something tied to Travis, maybe a drug deal, a secret he'd kept from her, his dizziness and stumbling a sign of something darker. A few clung to the idea that she'd run, spooked by her uncle's erratic behavior, his eyes all wrong, fleeing into a night that swallowed her whole. The journal's final words, "Tell Mom I love her," became a haunting refrain, shared across forums, printed on flyers, whispered in vigils, a child's love letter from the edge of oblivion. Rachel returned to Omaha, the journal in her carry-on, her heart heavy with fresh grief. A wound reopened after 19 years. She sat in Delilah's room, the star-patterned quilt soft under her hands, and read the entries again and again, each word a knife twisting deeper. The early pages were alive, with her daughter's light sketches of buffalo with crowns, diners with wobbly counters, Travis as a cowboy on a buffalo, his hat tilted, his grin fragile but real. July 5, 2005. "We saw a buffalo today, huge like a furry tank. Uncle Travis said they used to cover the plains. I drew one with a crown, king of the prairie," Delilah wrote, her voice vivid, her wonder a beacon in the dark. But the later entries carried a shadow, a growing unease, that crept into her words. July 5th. The desert is so quiet it's loud. I think about mom and dad. How they don't laugh anymore. Uncle Travis says you gotta leave to find yourself. He looked sad. Like he's lost. I saw him take a pill when he thought I wasn't looking. His hands shaking. The final entry was a fracture in the narrative. A cry from a child who sensed danger but didn't know its shape, its weight, its teeth. Rachel clutched the journal, her fingers tracing Delilah's handwriting, her sobs a silent scream that echoed through the empty house. The case was alive again, but the pain was raw, as fresh as that July morning 19 years ago, when her world stopped turning. Delilah's laughter, her dreams, her curls, swallowed by the desert's hungry dark. A void that gave nothing. All that remained was a journal, a mystery, and a mother who would never stop searching, her heart tethered to a 12-year-old girl who'd vanished into the night, her final words a plea that lingered like a ghost.
The discovery of Delilah Harper's journal behind the cracked mirror of room 12 at the Desert Rose Motel was a thunderclap that shattered the 19-year silence of a mystery that had carved itself into Rachel Harper's soul. The journal, its leather cover worn soft as a whispered prayer, its pages yellowed, yet pulsing with Delilah's loopy cursive and whimsical sketches, was both a lifeline and a torment. A fragile thread tethering Rachel to her daughter's final moments. She sat in Delilah's untouched bedroom in Omaha, Nebraska. The star-patterned quilt draped over her knees, its faded blues and golds a relic of a time when her daughter's laughter filled the house. The journal lay open in her trembling hands, each word, each sketch of cacti donning cowboy hats, UFOs glowing green, buffalo crowned like prairie kings, pulling her back to that summer when Delilah's chestnut curls danced with every step, her dreams of being an artist explorer lighting the world like a comet streaking across a Nebraska sky. But the final entry, something's wrong. I heard a noise outside like footsteps, slow and heavy. Uncle Travis is asleep, I think. He was acting weird, like dizzy, stumbling, his eyes all wrong. I'm scared. I'm hiding this so no one takes it. If you find this, tell Mom I love her. Was a wound that bled raw, a desperate cry from a 12-year-old girl who'd vanished into the Utah desert's ravenous star. Rachel's life, a shrine to her daughter, became consumed by the journal's weight. Its presence a beacon that burned her even as it guided her. At 53, her hair grayed early, her face etched with lines carved by grief's relentless chisel. She'd spent nearly 2 decades as a librarian, shelving books with a quiet precision that masked the storm in her heart. By night she haunted online forums, the subreddit r/diary vanishing her refuge, where thousands of strangers dissected her daughter's disappearance with a fervor that was both a comfort and a curse. The journal's discovery reignited a fire that had never died. Its pages a map to a truth she'd vowed to uncover. She read it obsessively, fingers tracing Delilah's handwriting, eyes lingering on sketches of diners with wobbly counters gleaming under fluorescent light, the Tetons piercing the sky like jagged teeth, Travis's Chevy pickup rattling through the plains, its fender dented from a long-ago fender bender. The early entries were a bomb, brimming with a child's wonder. We saw a buffalo today, huge, like a furry Uncle Travis says they used to cover the plains. I drew one with a crown, king of the prairie. But later ones carried a shadow, an unease that seeped into Rachel's bones, mirroring the dread that gripped her now. The desert is so quiet it's loud. Uncle Travis says you gotta leave to find yourself. He looked sad, like he's lost. I saw him take a pill when he thought I wasn't looking, his hands shaking. The final entry, jagged and rushed, the pencil pressed so hard it nearly tore the paper, was proof Delilah had been terrified, alone in that motel room. What had she heard? Why had she hidden the journal? Where was her daughter in this fleeting moment of hope and horror? The Salt Lake City Police Department, stirred by the journal's discovery, reopened the case with an urgency that felt like a desert storm breaking, its winds carrying both hope and fear. Detectives, led by Captain Laura Hensley, a veteran with a sharp mind and a quiet compassion for cold cases, dusted the journal for prints, finding only Delilah's, a fact that deepened the mystery. A locked door with no key. The Desert Rose, a derelict husk off I-80, its neon sign long dead, its rooms boarded up like a forgotten crypt, was searched again. Forensic teams, their breath fogging in the crisp air, combed room 12, prying at warped floorboards that creaked underfoot, tapping walls for hollows, seeking traces of a girl long gone. Blood, hair, fibers, anything to anchor her to that place. But 19 years had swept away evidence. The dust thick as a shroud, the motel a ghost whispering secrets it refused to share. The guest log from that summer was gone, destroyed when the property changed hands, its names and faces lost to the wind. Travis Harper, Rachel's brother, was a phantom. If alive he'd be 50, but no trace of him had surfaced since his disappearance after 6 months in a psychiatric facility, his mind fractured by guilt, suspicion, and the weight of questions he couldn't answer. The journal, with its cryptic final words, was their only clue, a puzzle piece with jagged edges that refused to fit into any clear picture. Rachel became a reluctant figurehead, her grief a quiet force that drew the world's gaze. She'd shunned the spotlight since the media swarm of that first year, when reporters camped outside her yellow house on Maple Street, their cameras flashing like vultures' eyes, their questions slicing like blades. Did you suspect Travis? Why let her go with him? Now, the frenzy returned, amplified by the digital age. True crime podcasters, their voices polished and hungry on platforms like X, flooded her inbox with interview requests, their emails cloaked in false empathy but reeking of exploitation, eager to spin her pain into clicks and downloads. Rachel refused, her pain too sacred, a private altar not meant for public consumption. She spoke only to Hensley and the small circle of Omaha locals who'd stood by her, joining her annual vigils under the Nebraska start, where they held Delilah's cactus sketch, a jaunty cowboy under a starry sky, and whispered her daughter's name into the dusk, a prayer that carried her love across the years, hoping it might reach her, wherever she was. The journal was a call to arms, its pages demanding Rachel act, pulling her from the quiet routines of her life into the heart of the mystery. She traveled to Salt Lake City, staying in a budget motel just off the highway, its sterile fluorescent lights and beige walls a cruel contrast to the crumbling relic where Delilah had vanished. She walked the Desert Roses grounds, now choked with brittle weeds that scratched at her ankles. The cactus mural on the office wall faded to a ghostly outline, its paint peeling like old skin under the desert sun. Standing outside room 12, its door boarded shut, the wood splintered and gray, she pressed her palm to it, the rough grain biting her skin, and closed her eyes, picturing Delilah inside, her small frame curled on the bed, sketching, writing. The air was heavy with dust and memory, the silence so loud it screamed, a chorus of absence that echoed in Rachel's chest. She clutched the journal, its leather warm against her skin, and whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm still looking." The desert wind stole her words, swirling them into the vast emptiness that had swallowed her daughter, leaving only the faint rustle of tumbleweeds skittering across the cracked asphalt. The police investigation moved slowly, bogged down by the weight of 19 years, and the absence of new evidence, each step a battle against time's erosion. They re-interviewed Carl, the motel manager from that summer, now 64, his face weathered, his memory foggy but his guilt a sharp blade that cut deeper with each passing year. He sat in a cluttered office at a Salt Lake City auto shop, his hands twisting a cigarette pack, and recounted Travis's collapse in the parking lot, the spilled water bottle glinting in the dawn, the eerie quiet of that morning when Delilah was simply gone. It was like she dissolved, he told Hensley, his voice cracking, eyes distant with regret. I should have checked on her, should have done something. But he had nothing new to offer, no hidden details to unlock the mystery, only the weight of a moment he'd failed to see. The police tracked down other guests from that night, but most were dead, had moved far away, or recalled no girl with curls, their lives untouched by the tragedy that had shattered Rachel's world. The journal's mention of footsteps, slow and heavy, sparked theories, an abductor, perhaps a trucker passing through, or a local who knew the motel's lonely layout, its isolation a perfect cloak for dark deeds. The Desert Rose sat on a desolate stretch of I-80, its only neighbors a gas station and a diner, both long shuttered, their windows dark as empty eyes, their stories silent. No security cameras had existed in 2005, no witnesses had come forward, and the desert kept its secrets, its sand a vault for the lost. Rachel's hope, fragile as a candle flame in a windstorm, rested on the journal, its pages a tether to her daughter's voice.
She read it nightly in her motel room, the hum of the air conditioner, a faint drone against the silence, memorizing every sketch, every word, as if they could summon Delilah back from the void. The early entries were a window to her daughter's joy, each one a brushstroke of a life cut short. We stopped at a gas station with a giant dinosaur statue. Uncle Travis pretended to be a T-Rex, chasing me around the pumps, and I laughed so hard I dropped my pencil. The sketches were meticulous, capturing the world through Delilah's eyes, diner counters gleaming under flickering fluorescent lights, motel signs buzzing in the dusk, a buffalo with a crown, proud and wild, its fur rendered in careful pencil stroke. But the later entries carried a growing unease, a shadow creeping into Delilah's words that mirrored the dread Rachel felt now. Uncle Travis was quiet today. He took a pill when he thought I wasn't looking, hid the bottle in his jacket. I think he's sad, but he won't say why. I drew us driving to the moon to make him smile. Rachel lingered on these words, her heart aching for the child who'd sensed her uncle's pain but couldn't name it. A girl trying to hold the world together with her pencil, and her boundless love. The final entry was a dagger to her chest, its words a wound that refused to heal. Rachel read it again and again, her fingers tracing the jagged letters, the pencil marks so deep they'd nearly torn the paper, as if Delilah had pressed her fear into the page. A desperate act of defiance against the dark. Something's wrong. I heard a noise outside, like footsteps, slow and heavy. Uncle Travis is asleep. I think he was acting weird, like dizzy, stumbling, his eyes all wrong. I'm scared. The plea, "Tell Mom I love her," haunted Rachel's dreams, a child's voice crying out from 19 years ago, echoing in the dark corners of her mind. She'd lie awake in the motel's sagging bed, the springs creaking beneath her, imagining Delilah, in room 12, her small frame curled in the shadows, hearing those footsteps, hiding the journal behind the mirror, her hands trembling, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest. What had she seen? Who was out there, lurking in the desert night? The questions gnawed at Rachel, a relentless hunger that left her hollow, her body a fragile shell sustained by grief, and a stubborn flickering hope. The online frenzy grew darker, a storm of speculation that threatened to drown her. The subreddit r/diary vanishing, now swollen to 50,000 members, exploded with activity, its users dissecting scans of the journal posted by a Utah news outlet, with a feverish intensity that bordered on obsession. Every word, every sketch was picked apart in sprawling threads. The footsteps Delilah heard, sparking wild theories. An abductor, some argued, a stranger lurking in the desert dark, watching the motel, waiting for a moment to strike, his shadow a stain on the night. Others pointed to Travis's weird behavior, his dizziness, his stumbling, his eyes all wrong, as evidence of something sinister, a crack in his facade, perhaps a secret he'd kept from Delilah, a danger that had followed him to the desert road. A vocal minority insisted she'd run, spooked by her uncle's erratic state, fleeing into a night that swallowed her whole, her small frame no match for the desert's vast, unyielding hunger. The journal's final plea, "Tell Mom I love her," became a haunting refrain, shared across platforms, printed on flyers pinned to bulletin boards, in small-town diners, whispered in candlelit vigils, a child's love letter, from the edge of oblivion that broke hearts and fueled debate. Rachel hired Elena Marquez, a private investigator and former detective, whose sharp eyes and relentless drive made her a beacon in the fog of the investigation. Elena, 42, her face lined with the weight of years spent chasing truths, pored over the journal, the police reports and the Desert Rose's history with a focus that was both surgical and compassionate. She drove Rachel to the motel, the two women walking the grounds under a sky bruised with clouds, Elena's boots crunching on the gravel as she noted the layout, the parking lot's proximity to the highway, the absence of streetlights, the isolation that made the Desert Rose a perfect void, a place where someone could vanish without a trace. This place was a black hole, Elena said, her voice low, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. Anyone could have been out there that night, trucker, drifter, local, or no. Those footsteps might have been Delilah's imagination, her fear amplifying the desert's silence. Rachel shook her head, her throat tight, unwilling to accept that her daughter's terror was a trick of the mind, a child's fear conjuring phantoms in the dark. She clutched the journal, its weight grounding her, and said, she heard something. She was scared for a reason. Elena chased leads the police had overlooked, her determination a lifeline for Rachel, who felt the world slipping beneath her feet. She tracked down Maria, a former Desert Rose maid, now 67, living in a small apartment in Nevada, her hands gnarled from years of labor, her memory sharp with details others had forgotten. Maria sat at a formica table, a cup of weak coffee cooling in her hands, and recalled a strange guest from that summer, a man in his 30s, quiet, driving a black sedan with out-of-state plate. He'd stayed in room 10, 2 doors from Delilah and Travis, and left the morning Delilah vanished, his departure silent, unnoticed in the chaos of Travis's collapse. Maria remembered his eyes, cold and watchful, like a hawk sizing up prey, and how he'd paid in cash, leaving no name, no trace, his presence a shadow that lingered in her mind. He didn't talk much, Maria said, her voice soft, her eyes distant, just watched, always watching. The police had never followed up, the guest log lost to time, and Elena's attempts to trace black sedans from 2005 led to dead ends, the car a ghost in a sea of ghosts. Another lead came from a retired trucker, 72, his voice rough with years of diesel and dust, who'd frequented the diner near the desert road. He sat in a Wyoming bar nursing a beer, his hands scarred from decades on the road, and told Elena about a night in that summer, seeing a girl with curls sketching at the motel curb, her pencil flying across a notebook. A man watched from a distance, his silhouette sharp against the dusk, tall and thin, not Travis, thought he was her dad, the trucker said, his eyes heavy with regret, didn't think twice, just kept driving. The description was vague, eroded by time, a memory crumbling like the motel itself, but Elena cross-referenced it with Maria's story, searching for a thread to tie the shadows together. The man's identity remained elusive, another phantom in a case full of them, but the image of Delilah sketching, unaware of eyes on her, haunted Rachel, a snapshot of her daughter's final hour. The journal's sketches offered clues, fragile threads in a tangled web that seemed to grow more knotted with each discovery. Delilah's drawings were meticulous, capturing details others missed. A diner's chrome counter, reflecting a waitress's tired smile, a motel sign's neon glow flickering in the dusk, a buffalo's proud crown rendered with a child's careful hand. One sketch, from the day before her disappearance, showed the Desert Rose's cactus mural, its paint peeling even then, but in the background was a shape, a blurry figure near the parking lot too vague to identify, a smudge of pencil and possibility. Had Delilah seen? Was this the source of the footsteps? Elena sent the sketch to a forensic artist, who worked to enhance it, sharpening the lines, but the figure remained a shadow, a ghost in graphite that taunted them with its ambiguity. Rachel stared at it for hours, her heart racing, imagining her daughter watching, fearing, hiding, her small hands trembling as she sketched a danger she couldn't name. Rachel's annual vigil drew hundreds, locals, reporters, true crime fans, who'd followed the case on X, their candles a sea of flickering light in the Nebraska dusk. She stood before them, the journal clutched to her chest, its leather warm against her skin, her voice trembling but resolute. Delilah's out there, she said, holding up the cactus sketch, its cowboy hat, jaunty under a starry sky. Her words are alive, and they're leading us to her. The crowd murmured, some in awe, others skeptical, their whispers a chorus of doubt and hope that swirled around her like the wind. Rachel felt a spark of defiance, fragile but fierce, a mother's love burning through 19 years of grief, a fire that refused to be extinguished. The journal was a new map, its pages pointing to truths buried in the desert's unforgiving sand, and she would follow it, no matter the cost. Elena's investigation gained traction with a new lead from Lila, a former bartender, 63, now living in a small Idaho town, her hands steady as she poured coffee in a diner where Elena found her. Lila had served Travis and Delilah at the diner near the Desert Rose, remembering Delilah's curls and her notebook, the way she sketched the counter's shine while Travis sat quietly, his hands unsteady, his coffee untouched. There was another guy, Lila said, her voice hesitant, her eyes distant with memory. He came in that night, sat at the counter, kept looking at them, wore a dark jacket, had a scar on his hand, right across the knuckles, drove off in a dark sedan, parked near the motel. The description didn't match Maria's guest in room 10, suggesting a second shadow in the dark, another figure circling Delilah and Travis. Lila recalled the man leaving just before Travis and Delilah, his car idling in the motel lot, its headlights cutting through the dusk like a predator's eyes. Elena cross-referenced the description with the trucker's memory, but without a name or license plate. It was another ghost, another tease that slipped through her fingers. Rachel clung to these fragments, her hope a flickering flame in a windstorm that threatened to snuff it out. She and Elena retraced Delilah's route along I-80, a pilgrimage through memory, stopping at every diner, gas station, and motel from Omaha to the Desert Rose. Rachel carried the journal, showing Delilah's sketches to locals, hoping for a spark of recognition, a face that might unlock the path. At a truck stop in Wyoming, an elderly cashier, her hands trembling with age, recognized the UFO keychain in a sketch, its glow-in-the-dark plastic of vivid detail. Saw a girl with one like that, she said, her eyes cloudy with memory. With a man, looked like her dad, but there was another guy, watching from the lot, leaning against a dark car. Rachel's heart leapt, but the cashier's memory was vague, the moment fleeting, a wisp of smoke that dissolved when grasped. Another dead end, another wound that bled. But Rachel pressed on, her love for Delilah, a fire that burned brighter with each step. Elena's persistence led to another lead, a faint pulse in the silence. She interviewed Travis's old contacts from his Weiler days in the 1990s, when he'd run with a rough crowd, small-time dealers, drifters, men who lived on the edges of the law, their lives a tangle of debts and danger. A former mechanic in Omaha, now 75, his hands stained with decades of grease, remembered Travis talking about a bad crowd he'd left behind, men who didn't forgive debts, who'd come looking if you crossed them. He was always looking over his shoulder, the mechanic said, his voice rough, his eyes squinting against the sun. Said he owed someone, didn't say who. The idea that Travis's past had followed him to the Desert Rose was a new thread, thin but taut with possibility. A rope Rachel clung to with bleeding hands. Had someone from that world found him? Had Delilah seen something she wasn't meant to? A child caught in a web of adult sin. Rachel's health began to falter, her body worn by sleepless nights, and the relentless weight of grief, her hands trembling as she held the journal, her eyes hollowed by exhaustion. She'd lost weight, her frame frail, but her spirit was unbroken, fueled by Delilah's voice, by the sketches that seemed to speak to her in the quiet moment. She began to dream of her daughter, not as the 12-year-old she'd lost, but as a young woman, her curls tamed, her eyes wise, holding a sketchbook, smiling softly. "Keep looking, Mom," the dream Delilah said, her voice clear, her hand warm against Rachel. Rachel woke with tears streaming down her face. The journal opened beside her, its pages turned to the cactus sketch, its cowboy hat a beacon of hope. She wrote in the margins, her handwriting shaky but fierce, "I'll find you, baby. I'll never stop. I love you." An anonymous tip, sent to the police via a burner email, offered a new name, Roy Keller, a drifter with a rap sheet for petty theft and assault, who'd bragged in a Nevada bar about taking care of business at a Utah motel. The tip included a grainy photo of Keller from the early 2000s, tall, thin, with cold eyes and a scar on his cheek, a man whose presence seemed to chill the air. Elena tracked him to a halfway house in Reno, now 54, his face weathered like old leather, his hands scarred from a life on the road. When questioned, Keller sat in a bare interrogation room, his posture slouched, but his eyes sharp, and denied knowing Travis, or Delilah, his voice flat, his words clipped. "Never been to the Desert Rose," he said, but his hands fidgeted when shown the journal's sketch of the blurry figure, his eyes flickering with something: fear, recognition, guilt. Elena didn't believe him, her instincts screaming, but there was no evidence, no prints, no records, only a sketch and a hunch, a shadow that slipped through her fingers like sand. Rachel watched Keller through a one-way glass, her heart pounding, her breath shallow, his cold eyes a void that mirrored the desert that had swallowed her daughter. Was this the man who'd taken Delilah? The police let him go, their hands tied by the lack of evidence, but Elena wasn't deterred, her determination a fire that burned as brightly as Rachel's. Elena dug deeper into Keller's past, finding connections to I-80 truck stops, to men who'd known Travis in his Weiler days, a network of shadows that stretched across the desert, like a spider's. She uncovered a link to Eddie Vance, a small-time dealer who'd worked with Travis in the 1990s, now dead, killed in a drug deal gone wrong. Eddie's brother Carl Vance, 61, had been in Utah in 2005, driving a black sedan, his life a patchwork of petty crimes and regret. Elena found Carl in a Nevada trailer park, living in a rusted trailer, his frame gaunt, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. When confronted, he admitted knowing Travis, owing him money from a decades-old deal. "He called me that summer," Carl said, his voice low, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "Said he was on the road, wanted to settle things. I met him at the Desert Rose, argued outside, but I didn't touch the girl. I swear." He claimed he'd argued with Travis in the motel parking lot, demanding payment, unaware Delilah was watching from the window of room 12. He'd left that night, he said, after Travis collapsed, spooked by the scene, driving into the dawn without looking back. Elena pressed him, her questions sharp, but Carl stuck to his story, his fear palpable, a man haunted by his own cowardice.
The journal offered a clue. Rachel had overlooked in her grief. A sentence buried in an earlier entry. "Uncle Travis got a call today. He stepped outside the truck. Thought I didn't hear. He sounded angry, said, 'Not here, not now.' He looked scared after. His eyes all wide." Rachel's pulse quickened, a spark of something new igniting in her chest. Had Delilah overheard Travis's call with Carl Vance? Had she seen their argument, mistaken it for danger, heard Carl's footsteps crunching on the gravel outside? Elena theorized that Delilah, already spooked by Travis's erratic behavior, his seizures, his stumbling, the pills he hid, had been pushed over the edge by the stranger's presence, hiding the journal behind the mirror in a desperate act of protection, then fleeing into the desert night, her fear outrunning her small body's strength. Rachel's hope flared, but so did her fear, a twin flame that burned her from within. If Travis's past was involved, the danger was deeper, darker than she'd imagined, a shadow stretching beyond the Desert Rose. She began to wonder if he'd been targeted, if Delilah had been collateral damage, a child caught in a storm she didn't understand. The thought was unbearable, a mother's worst nightmare, a daughter paying for someone else's mistakes. Rachel drove to the Desert Rose alone one evening, the sky a bruise of purple and gold, and stood in the parking lot where Travis had collapsed, the gravel biting through her thin sneakers. She closed her eyes, imagining Delilah hearing those footsteps, her small hands shoving the journal behind the mirror, her heart racing as she slipped out the door, running into a night that offered no mercy. Rachel sank to her knees, the gravel cutting into her palms, and wept, her voice a raw plea that echoed in the silence. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I let you go." Elena's investigation took a new turn when she interviewed Paul Red Malone, a 60-year-old drifter living off the grid in a Montana cabin, his life a patchwork of odd jobs and old grudges. Red, a former mechanic with a rap sheet for smuggling, had known Travis from their days in a drug-running crew in the 1990s. Elena drove through winding mountain roads to reach him, finding a man weathered by time, his red beard now streaked with gray, his eyes wary but sharp. Red admitted Travis had called him, panicked, saying someone from their past was after him, a debt unpaid, a grudge that hadn't died. "I told him to lay low," Red said, his voice gravelly, his hands busy whittling a piece of wood into a crude animal shape. "Didn't know he had a kid with him, or I'd have told him to get her out of there." Red recalled a man named Jimmy, who'd held a grudge against Travis over a botched deal, a man with a scar on his hand, last seen in Utah driving a dark sedan. Jimmy, whose real name was James Holt, was dead, killed in a bar fight years ago, but his presence in 2005 matched Lila's description of the man at the diner, a shadow circling closer to Delilah and Travis. Rachel's heart raced as Elena shared the news. Had James Holt been the man Delilah saw? Had his grudge against Travis led to her daughter's fate? Elena cross-referenced Holt's records, finding he'd stayed at a truck stop near the Desert Rose, his sedan logged in a 2005 police report for speeding, a fleeting glimpse of a man who might have changed everything. But Holt was gone, his secrets buried with him, and the trail seemed to end there, a wall Rachel couldn't climb. She returned to the journal, reading it again, searching for something missed, a clue hidden in Delilah's word. Another sketch caught her eye, one she'd overlooked, a faint outline of a car in the Desert Rose parking lot, Not Travis's truck but a sedan. Its shape blurry but distinct. Its headlights a slash of pencil in the dusk. Had Delilah seen Holt's car? Was it the source of her fear? The footsteps she'd heard. Rachel's pulse quickened, her hope reigniting. Fragile but fierce. A flame that refused to die. Elena's team scoured I-80's forgotten corners, chasing Holt's trail, interviewing anyone who might have crossed his path. They found a former truck stop clerk, 78 in a Nevada nursing home, his voice frail but clear, who recalled a man with a scarred hand buying cigarettes near the desert rose, nervous glancing toward the motel. Had a girl in his car once, the clerk said, his memory foggy, his eyes cloudy with age, curly hair, quiet look scared. Rachel's heart stopped. Was it Delilah? Had Holt taken her? The clerk's memory faded, offering no proof, but the image haunted Rachel. A child in a stranger's car, her eyes wide with fear, her voice silenced by the desert's vast indifference. Rachel's health deteriorated, her sleepless nights a torment, her days haunted by the rhythm of those footsteps, slow and heavy, a sound she could almost hear in the quiet of her motel room, a relentless echo that woke her with a scream. She'd sit in Delilah's room when she returned to Omaha, the journal open, writing in its margins, her words a conversation with a ghost. I'm looking for you, baby. I'll never stop. I love you. The house was silent, the stars outside cold and distant, but Rachel's love was a fire that burned through the years, unyielding, eternal. A breakthrough came when a volunteer searcher, combing the Bonneville Salt Flats, 30 miles from the desert rose, found a child's sneaker buried in the sand, its doodled soles faded but unmistakable, a star, a cactus, a tiny UFO, mirroring the sketches in Delilah's journal. Rachel flew to Utah, clutching the cactus sketch, her heart a storm of hope and dread, the plane's hum a faint drone against her racing thoughts. The police confirmed the shoe was Delilah's, the doodles eerily similar to her journal's art, a relic of a girl who'd walked the earth with wonder. No other remains were found. The desert's white expanse a blank page that refused to speak, its vastness a mockery of Rachel's pain. Rachel held the shoe in a police evidence room, her fingers tracing the faded ink, her sobs raw and primal, a mother's grief spilling over like a river, breaking its banks. Was this all that remained of her daughter? Had Delilah run, as some theorized, spooked by Travis's behavior, fleeing into the desert's cruel embrace, her small body no match for its hunger? Or had someone taken her, carried her to the salt flats, left the shoe as a taunt or a mistake? Elena pushed for a deeper search, mobilizing drones, search dogs and a small army of volunteers who combed the salt flats, under a merciless sun, their boots crunching on the cracked earth. They found a weathered backpack, half buried in the sand, its canvas frayed but intact, containing a glow-in-the-dark UFO keychain, and a faded sketch of a cactus, its cowboy hat jaunty despite the year. Rachel recognized them instantly, her heart breaking anew, the keychain a twin to the one Delilah had clipped to her jeans, the sketch a piece of her daughter's soul. Nearby, under a thin layer of sand, they found skeletal remains, small and fragile, a child's frame preserved by the desert's dry, cold embrace. DNA tests confirmed it was Delilah, the results delivered in a sterile police office. Hensley's voice gentle but heavy with the weight of truth. The coroner found no signs of trauma, suggesting exposure or dehydration. A girl who'd fled into the night and couldn't find her way back, her body claimed by the desert's relentless hunger. Rachel's world collapsed, her grief a tidal wave that drowned hope, leaving her gasping in its wake. She returned to Omaha, the journal, shoe and keychain, her daughter's final relics, each one a knife that cut deeper with every touch. She sat in Delilah's room, the star-patterned quilt wrapped around her, and wrote in the journal's margins, "I found you, baby. I'm so sorry I let you go." The truth was a bitter pill. Delilah, scared by Travis's collapse, and the presence of James Holt, had mistaken him for danger, hiding the journal in a desperate act of protection, then running into the desert night, her fear outpacing her strength. Travis, lost to a seizure, hadn't known his memory erased by the blackout, his collapse a tragedy that set the chain in motion. Holt, likely the man with the scarred hand, had left, his grudge against Travis unresolved, unaware of the child he'd frightened into flight. Rachel uncovered a final clue in the journal, a sentence she'd missed in her grief. "I saw a man outside,
Not Uncle Travis, tall with a mark on his hand. He looked at me then walked away. It matched Holt, confirming Delilah's fear of him, her decision to run a response to a threat she couldn't understand. Carl Vance, also tied to Travis's past, was questioned again, admitting he'd seen Holt at the motel but said nothing, fearing trouble from his own dad. Vance faced charges for obstruction, his lies delaying the truth, and was sentenced to a year in a Nevada jail, a hollow victory that offered Rachel no solace. Travis remained a ghost, his fate unknown, a man lost to his own demon. Rachel forgave him in her heart, her anger replaced by sorrow for a brother who'd loved Delilah, but couldn't protect her, his life unraveling in the wake of her loss. She found purpose in honoring her daughter's memory, working with a local artist, Sarah Nguyen, to publish Delilah's sketches as a book, Delilah's Dreams. The book, filled with cacti, UFOs and crowned buffalo, was a labor of love, its pages a testament to a girl who'd seen the world with wonder. Proceeds went to charities for missing children, a legacy that gave Rachel a fragile sense of peace, a way to keep Delilah's light alive. Rachel held a final vigil in Omaha, the journal in her hands, Delilah's buffalo sketch taped to a candle, its flame steady in the still air. Thousands gathered, their candles a galaxy of light under a sky as wide as Delilah's dreams, their faces a mosaic of compassion and shared grief. Delilah Harper, Rachel said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. You're home now. I love you. The crowd stood in silence, their flames a silent vow, a promise to remember a girl who'd loved fiercely, whose voice lived on in pencil and ink. Rachel scattered Delilah's ashes in the Nebraska plains, the journal beside her, its pages fluttering in the breeze, a bridge to a daughter who'd never truly left her. The desert rose was demolished, its rusted sign and crumbling walls reduced to rubble, its secrets buried in the sand. Rachel kept the journal, reading it under the stars on clear nights, hearing Delilah's laughter in the wind, feeling her presence in the quiet moments when the world fell away. The mystery was solved, the pain eternal, but Rachel found peace in Delilah's love, a light that burned forever, a mother and daughter bound by a journal, hidden in the dark, a testament to a bond that time and tragedy could never break.